So it looks like the attendee numbers have stabilized. Maybe we just kick off, and then the webinar is recorded as well. So if anyone joins late or wants to watch it afterwards, that's absolutely fine. So welcome everyone. Great that so many of you wanted to join a Forma webinar at the start of the year. My name is Katarina, and I will be delivering the webinar together with Andres here, who's my colleague in the customer success team. And we are both, as you mentioned, Andres, based in Oslo in Norway. And we recently started running a new version of this webinar based on feedback that we got from previous attendees, where it was asked that we do less talking with slides and more hands-on work in the software itself. So we'll be doing that today as well with a site in San Francisco. So the agenda will be as follows. We'll start with some practical information, and then we're going to jump into Forma. And as mentioned, we'll be working on a site at the San Francisco waterfront. It's actually the location of the Autodesk offices there. And it was recently also the case example of a Forma design contest that we ran. So we thought it would be fun to reuse it. And neither Andres or I have been there before, but we hope to get the chance to go to San Francisco at some point. And then at the end, we will leave some time for questions as well. So if you're wondering anything, pop it in the chat, and we will try to make time for that. So the webinar will be recorded, as I mentioned, and it will be shared with you afterwards as well. It'll also be posted on the webinar landing page that you may have seen on our help center, along with the other Forma webinars that we run. So do check that page out if you're interested in viewing recordings of previous webinars, where we go through slightly different workflows and different topics, or if you want to sign up for new webinars. Then, as mentioned, we'll try to get back to questions at the end. So pop them in the chat, but we also encourage you to visit our online forum and ask any further questions there. This is a great place to discuss workflows and also share tips and tricks with other Forma users and talk with our developers as well. Then finally, just a short disclaimer that the proposal that we are showing today is purely for demo purposes. There's no ongoing work being carried out on this site that we are involved with. So it's just a case example. But then into the fun part, today's challenge. What we're going to be doing specifically is set up the Market Street site in Forma, which is the site that you can see on the image here. We're going to fetch relevant data, such as property boundaries and buildings, and then we are going to define some height and setback constraints that you can see detailed here. And then based on that, Andres is going to draw a proposal, tag functions, and try to achieve the kind of rough gross floor area split that you can see here. Then finally, we're going to turn our attention towards the analysis capabilities in Forma. And to do that, I thought we could identify a suitable location for an outdoor cafe or an outdoor seating area in the open space zones that we'll draw. We'll be looking at wind flow patterns, pedestrian comfort, microclimate, and also sun to make an informed assessment on that. So I think that's what we'll mention in the introduction. And without further ado, let's head into Forma. And I will stop sharing so that you can address.
Excellent. Thanks, Katarina. Great. So sharing. So this is our current demo hub. Just to bring, for those of you who are maybe not as familiar with this, you are basically able to join several hubs, either through your AC collection or standalone licenses. You have your projects here in current view. That's showing only my recent projects. There's also a members page illustrating where my sort of colleagues are located as far as access types, and external collaborators will also be listed here. And then some more general hub settings for those of you who are an administrator for your hub. Currently, my recent project shows sort of the similar project, the webinar. But below this, there is more learning resources that are aimed to kind of bring you into the project that you're in the demo project or into your own project, to step by step show you how you can use Forma. And yeah, I'd also advise you to do this after your after this webinar. So to begin with, we are creating a new project. It's mentioned that it was in San Francisco, so I'll actually just type San Francisco here. The map that you see is currently like this gray mass. You can also select a satellite image. For our project, it is Market Street. I don't remember where that is, so I will type that again. I think this is looking right. Okay, right. So as you can see, there's a square that is kind of framing our map. If I do scroll out, it may break and it'll show a widescreen version of your map. And that is essentially telling you the maximum size of your project, which is fairly large at the moment. So, but we don't care too much about our huge surroundings. We care primarily about this. So we'll keep this maintained. I can confirm the map area. There were a few more statistics there, but not really as interesting for now. This is all sort of in real time, obviously, and the main sort of next flow that we're going into is selecting the data order. So essentially what we've done, we've already processed one terrain order, which is to build the map, the texture for the map. The next part is going to be selecting buildings. For the US, we have several sources, FEMA, OpenStreetMap. This one here is a global data source, but for the US, we'll actually go ahead and use OpenCityModel. When we're done with this, we'll also order property boundaries. As you can see here, it's giving us a small notification that this area is too large. So I'll actually just go ahead and crop this by using these blue order boundaries. This is a bit inaccurate, but good enough. I'll scroll up again and order this. We know that data is very much a topic that architects and real estate developers care a lot about, and sometimes these aren't good enough and you want to import your own, which you acquire through your sort of traditional sources, which is also possible. So you have OBJ and IFC, as well as DXF and raster images. So that's just good to know. So when we're done with ordering these, as we've done, we can actually view the status in our library. So the library is a part of our left-hand side menu. It shows data orders and it also shows imports. So as you can see, there's a current status that the buildings did process, as well as property boundaries. The notification should also appear in the top side of your screen if you did not catch that just now. When we've done this, well, when the order is complete, we can go ahead and add these geometries to our project. So for our case, we wish to import the surrounding buildings and sort of leave a blank site for our new development. So I'll hold, what I'm doing now is holding in Shift. and deselecting these buildings. So as you can see in the top here, 126 geometry is selected. So if I was keeping all, then these would also be added, and it would be add up to 131. Great. So this is looking a bit more like a new development project, blank canvas. One more data to add is the property boundaries. Again, same logic. You can select and deselect as you see. We're gonna go ahead and just add our immediate surroundings. And then it's good to maintain sort of awareness of what this is actually meaning when we're dressing up our project. And to do that, we'll go back to our navigator. So the navigator is a part of our left-hand menu. It shows us what proposals we have and what layers we have. And the layers that exist in Forma are either organized at the base level, so a shared component. If I hover above the edit button, it'll showcase a bit about what this base means. As you can see, the buildings and the property boundaries were automatically added to the base layers. And if we were to design a concept, they would be added to our proposal layer. This will be more evident and more sort of clear when we progress. But to begin with, I will click Edit Base. I will select these two or these three site limits. And on the right-hand side, use the option to define these geometries as site limits. These are now also appearing red, just to illustrate that that's been in fact done. And I can also see here the square footage for the site area. So that's our first step. And if I go back to my sort of notes on as far as what this challenge was all about, it was setting up the site, but then also start designing some constraints. And we have a few constraints on these parcels. So what you would typically want to do is then bring up your limits in your toolbar. This is also part of your sort of Forma user interface. You can navigate site limits, and you can also design this as is, not using any site limit, using property boundaries that were ordered, but rather drawing them manually. I'll just illustrate that on a neighboring plot. This is essentially the same for the same function using your freehand tools. But for constraints, we'll go ahead and scroll down to constraint, and we'll go ahead and draw this using a cube as a shape. We can lock and sort of snap to existing geometries. So I will actually create a base that is replicating the site limit and adding 78 feet here. Okay, then I will select the direction, which is up. And this is our sort of first slab that tells us a bit about what we can build here. There is one more constraint, and that is a maximum height of 137 feet, which I'll go ahead and reignite, and that is building on top of this base. So the setback was 33 feet. So we'll go ahead and just build that on top for the moment. Then 78 minus 137 is 37 minus 78, 59. So we'll go ahead and add this, and let's see here, do that again. So if you want to repeat any action, there's also a very nice tool that I like to bring up, and that's called the quick access. It basically tells you that if you want to, for instance, repeat a last tool, that the key is to press spacebar. So instead of going back here, finding constraint, I can actually just press spacebar if that wasn't in fact the last thing I used. So 59 feet up here, and then we'll drag this in 33 feet. 33, great. So this is our I don't know what you want to call it, building envelope or constraint. What we'll go ahead and do now is assign some volumes. There is already some sort of pre-made, but for this project or for this site, we're going to design two buildings, one for office and commercial spacing, and that is functions that we wish to kind of keep a track of. We want to design volumes at a very sort of abstract level, but also maintain a certain level of sort of control. And to do this kind of control, we'll bring up our toolbar here on the right, area metrics, displaying our functions. So the default functions in Forma are residential, commercial, and unspecified. We wish to create a new function with a different color here. Let's see, it was commercial, office space, and residential. So we'll just go ahead and type office. And here you can again define different area calculations based on ratios. We can also, again, use area metrics to create further metrics that are assigned to all functions or specific functions. So that's added here, and we can go ahead and design something. So design tools are again in our right-hand panel. We have more tools on the left-hand side. We'll also capture a bit of what they are. And then on the bottom right, we have our sort of map tools. So we can show north, we can toggle between 2D and 3D. We can save certain camera positions, which is fairly useful if you're creating a report for some sort of meeting, for instance. Let's see, here it is, save camera position. And it's saving. And we also have various display views. So you can showcase different shadows. You can also select terrain as an underlay. There are also, for everyone who's been testing it out a bit, there are a nice extensions menu here that enables you to add more functionality beyond what Forma sort of out of the box have. But to begin with, we will design some volumes. So we're drawing a basic building, which is essentially a footprint with a height. So we'll go ahead and lock that to our constraint here. And we'll go ahead and should I use the repeat so I notice? And we'll go ahead and lock this. Yeah. Okay. Not perfect, but something close. So let's see, this was 10 feet perhaps. Yeah. Great. So you can already see that the first floor here is actually slightly higher than the remaining floors. That's actually quite intentional. It's what typically is, that's typically the case. We'll go ahead and change a function by selecting the roof of this first slab and just assign it to, say, commercial. And then we'll go ahead and select this slab and go ahead and assign this to office. So what this has given me is already, through the analysis of area metrics, a breakdown on rentable area and gross floor area. So if I select the entire site, as you can see here from the analysis area, it's showcasing the building coverage, both in percentage and in square footage, the gross floor area per function, so commercial and office, and again for commercial and office on rentable area. We'll go ahead and draw one more volume before we switch into some more pre-made volumes that are a bit more suitable for our next phase of more analysis on the site. So I think this was something along this line. And we'll snap this. Okay. Yeah, I'm actually not too sure. This was signed. Yeah. Great. So just as a recap, we've started adding volumes to a project that we've sort of defined with constraints. We've also brought in a lot of different third-party data. We've also wanting to showcase maybe this to another colleague. So we'll go ahead and just make them a collaborator. I can, for project level access, you can also just copy an invite link. I believe it's valid for about 7 days or so. So you can actually, if I make a viewer, copy this link, I can share it here in the chat. And for those who feel free to join, you can join. Main idea here is, again, making everything cloud-based and easy to use. Let's go into what we had pre-made. So this is buildings that Katarina has nicely modeled ahead of this webinar, and it's our left portion of the site, and then there is the full analysis or full project, which is again trying to build on from what we started. Additionally, there are a few vegetation elements that are, in this case, primarily for aesthetics, but could also be used for simulating differences when running wind analysis or running solar analysis to ensure that shadows also play a role in this. Or even for the microclimate analysis, which is more and more a topic from our customers. Great, I think that's where I turn the screen back to you, Katarina.
Yes, wonderful. I just wanted to take a minute, Andres, to try to address some of the good questions that popped up in the chat. There were some really good ones. Just give me 1 second, because there is a link that I wanted to share for the kind of product updates where it's possible to see what we're working on currently and learn more about the roadmap. So let me share my screen with you. Great questions, by the way. All right, can you see my screen with the Forma forum?
Yes, sorry. Yep, we do.
Yep.
Can you? Audience. Yes, absolutely.
Okay, awesome. So we had a couple of questions in the Q&A window. First of all, who is the target, or who are the target audience for Forma? Great question. So the target audience for Forma is really any professional who's working with early stage design and planning. So in the kind of design and concept phase of projects. For example, an architect or an urban planner, but it could also be others. Comparing InfraWorks with Forma, I don't have enough knowledge about InfraWorks to do that. So I think I will relay you to the forum to ask that one. From a workflow perspective in the AEC industry, at what stage would you stop with Forma and move on to the next product? Also a very good question. So Forma is targeted quite specifically towards the early stages. So when your design gets very advanced, you could, for instance, utilize some of our integrations with Revit or Rhino and continue working in other tools. But we are working on continuously also providing more design capabilities directly in Forma to allow you to stay there for longer. But it really depends on what your purpose of using Forma is. If it's primarily to do analysis on a design, you could also, if you prefer, choose to model, for example, in Rhino, and then bring it into Forma for analysis. So there are kind of many ways to use the software, but it's situated and best suited in the early stages. And then the final question, is there a future roadmap? We don't operate with roadmaps, so we can never promise features. Being a cloud product, it means that we constantly release new updates. You don't have to wait for any release cycles, so you'll probably see that the software changes quite rapidly. But we'll put this in the chat as well. We have a Forma Community Knowledge Center, and every month we post Forma monthly product updates, where we share recent updates and also kind of short-term what's next. So what are we working on right now? So if you're interested in that, I will pop it in the chat. That's where you can read more about it. All right, keep your questions coming in. I'm gonna jump back into Forma now. Can you see Forma?
Yes, we do.
Yes, perfect. So good job modeling, Andres. Now we're gonna turn our focus towards the analysis capabilities in Forma, which we think is one of the main kind of value drivers, or one of the main ways that you can get value out of using Forma in your projects. So we want it to be really quick and easy to gain insights about different qualities, for example, your area metrics, but also more physical or environmental qualities like your sun conditions, daylight conditions, wind conditions, etc. early on, so that you can make informed design decisions along the way. The analyses are located in the right-hand toolbar at the very top. So here you can see an overview of the analyses that are available at the moment. Andres went through briefly the area metrics. These will vary by country. So if you aren't familiar with, rentable area and gross floor area, these are specific to the US because that's where the project is located. But if you're in Europe somewhere, this would be in meters, and you'd see slightly different metrics depending on where you are. So this is where you gain insight about that. Your unit count, we haven't drawn any units here, but we could have, and also parking if you had drawn that. And then there is sun hours, daylight, wind, microclimate, operational energy, noise, and as of quite recently, solar energy as well. And then we have some of our channel partners are working on interesting new capabilities as well here. That's one of the main strategies of Forma, to build an open and extendable software so that third parties can provide more, perhaps local analyses, for instance. So what I wanted to do now is take a look at some of the analyses, and we can start with sun. The way that the analyses work is that you have to choose the area that you want to analyze. We can do that via the little selection window in the top right-hand corner. As you can see, by default, we select the site limit, but you could also draw a zone. Let me see where that is. Via the limit icon here, you can see site limit and then zone. If you wanted to, for example, just analyze the one side or the other side, or a much larger area. Selecting the site limit, though, means that you're going to see the sun analysis just on the site limit, but of course the surroundings are taken into account. So in terms of shadows and so on, that's taken into account. Then you can choose the analysis date. We've selected 2 dates here, but you could add as many as you want. March 21st and June 21st. And then you run the analysis. This, depending on which analysis it is, it will take, anything from 30 seconds to a couple of minutes. For the wind analysis, it can take up to an hour or even more because it's very heavy. But there we have a simulation-based rapid version as well. So there we go, it's ready. Let me see, I've got my Zoom window slightly in the way. Open analysis. There we go. All right, so we are now inside this analysis mode. And what we're looking at is the number of direct sun hours on the facade and ground on March 21st in this case, between these hours and these hours, and you can change the time interval as well. The colors correspond to the number of hours. So you can see this little scale bar or legend at the bottom. The darker the colors, the fewer hours of sun. So we can go ahead also and inspect particular points. Maybe we want to view it more from a 2D view. If we're going to stay true to the case of trying to establish where we could put an outdoor cafe. You have this inspection mode in the top right-hand corner where you can click on particular points, either on the facade or on the ground, to inspect the qualities on that particular point. So here on the south-facing outdoor space, we've got 5.6 hours of sun where I clicked, and then we've got 0.7 hours of sun between the two buildings here. So slightly poorer sun qualities there, unsurprisingly. Then we've got slightly darker north-facing facades than south-facing facades, but all in all, quite good sun qualities on the facades. And then we could also have looked at June 21st as well. If I switch the date, then you'll get an updated analysis plot. On the side, you also, depending on the analysis, you'll have different graphs and statistics presented to you. So here we have an overview of the number of square feet that are sunlit for X amount of hours, the different brackets, which you could view in square feet or in percentage or in square meters if this were in Europe. All right, so all in all, quite good sun conditions. We've got a really nice bright space over here. Quite a nice courtyard in the middle here as well. Some challenges with sun between the two tallest buildings. So then I'm going to return. Oh, one thing I also wanted to show you, you can filter on the legend here. So if you want to see, for example, all the areas with more than 4 hours, you can filter there. And you can also do like a sun, like a shadow study at the bottom here, looking at, you know, different times of day. Okay, then I'm going to go back. And the next thing that we can look at is the wind conditions. So the wind icon is the fourth one along. And here it's important to emphasize that there are two different analysis methods when it comes to analyzing wind, and also two different types of insights that we can get. For wind and also for noise, we have a rapid version, which is the one that you see that popped up very quickly on screen here. And I think the best way to explain this is if I open up via the Help Center, because it's a good way of showing you the Help Center as well, via the Help button. If you type in wind and then open the introduction to the wind analysis, there's a little table here that explains the differences between the rapid and the detailed wind analysis quite well. So the rapid wind analysis is simulation based. So it's trained on data sets that have been run using the detailed version. This can be useful as you're designing to get quick input. It updates in almost real time when you're changing the buildings. So it's good for giving directional input on your designs and seeing tendencies. However, if you want to document your results, to put in a report, for example, and you want it to be more specific, more accurate, more detailed, then we would recommend running the heavier version. Here you can see what technology it uses, the detail level, and so on. And this is based on data from something called the Global Wind Atlas. So let's take a look at the detailed one. As you can see, this can take a while to run. So we've triggered this one previously. I think we have one good one from December that we can open up here. Now, there are two insights we can get from the wind analysis. And I'm going to start with the one called wind direction, because I think this is the most intuitive one. It shows wind flow patterns relative to this compass or wind rose here. You see you have different segments for the directions that you can click on to see what the situation looks like if we, for example, view wind from direct west, wind from southwest. The size of the segment suggests that southwest is the most prevalent wind condition in this area. Then you have a little graph here where I think it's the median wind speed is the one that's selected, but you could look at a drastic situation as well if you wanted to. And then we could also turn on the wind. Let's see if that worked. The wind streamlines, and then didn't want to turn off. That's a shame. Oh, maybe it's just taking a while to load. There we go. And you can also see then the streamlines and start to identify areas that perhaps you can see there is downdraft happening or wind tunneling effects. You can see it quite clearly at the back of the site here along this really tall building. You have the wind being pushed from southwest between the tall building and the small one, and you're getting this wind tunnel right there. So this is really helping us start to identify what the wind conditions are like. You can see, even though we have these super nice sort of sight lines through the city towards the San Francisco Bay, it also means that when we have wind from the south, it's quite windy along those open streets. So on our site, you can really see that between the buildings, especially, and on the plateau right here. However, where we had the sunny space earlier, in front of this building, it's actually quite quiet, not that much wind. So that's really good to know when we're thinking of where to place our cafe. You also have some further stats down here that you can look at. Then the second thing we can get insight about is the wind comfort or pedestrian comfort. And this is an analysis that tells you something about how comfortable it is for a pedestrian on the ground doing various activities, or how suitable the areas are for a pedestrian doing various activities. So here you can see the legend at the bottom. Light green suggests that the area is suitable for seated activity, dark green standing, yellow strolling, walking, etc. So this takes an aggregated view of the wind conditions and looks at the probability of occurrence, and then gives you an idea of the pedestrian comfort based on different scales. Here you can see there are many comfort scales. It's the Lawson scale that we use by default. Depending on where you are in the world, you might want to consider one of the other scales because they have different thresholds for what is considered comfortable. So if you're in a very hot place, more wind might be good because then it cools it down. And if you want to read more about that, we recommend going into the help center, either via the little question mark or via the help button, and then you can read more about the thresholds and, you know, everything, how we calculate this. So here we have an area up front in the sunny space category, suitable for seated activities because the dominating wind direction is from the south. However, as we saw when we looked at the wind flow patterns, we have these orange spaces that are maybe suitable for strolling, but not for spending a longer period of time because we have these wind tunnels forming between the buildings. Same on our little plateau here. Looks like it could be, at first glance, a nice space to have a roof terrace or something. but actually maybe we want to consider how we program that space because of the windiness. So that's the pedestrian comfort. Then we can go back into our analysis view. And the next thing that we want to look at is microclimate, because now we know what the sun conditions are like, we know what the wind conditions are like, but we want to see what does this really mean for a person who's going to be using these spaces. What's the perceived temperature like? We've also run this one previously. Going to open the one from December 4th. And the microclimate analysis, it combines the results from the sun analysis, the wind analysis, and also daylight analysis, and considers local weather data in this area to tell us something about the perceived temperature on ground. And this is quite interesting because whilst the air temperature can be one thing, the way that your site layout is, building form, can have a huge impact on the local climate because of shading and how it affects wind. So that's what this analysis is useful for. Here you can see you can choose which month of the year you want to look at. So let's take a look at June, since we had the sun analysis in June. Then here you can see the average air temperature in June in this area. I think the data goes about 8 years back. 70 degrees Fahrenheit as the average there. We could also consider a warmer climate or a cooler climate. Then you can choose the wind direction. Since southwest is most prevalent, maybe that's the one that's most relevant to look at. And then at the bottom here, you can see the weather data that's assumed, the humidity, cloud cover, and so on. And then, as we did with the other analyses, we can inspect particular points. And this is, I think, quite interesting because, I mean, this is not that many meters apart or feet apart, but you've got a difference in perceived temperature of, you know, over 10 degrees Fahrenheit from 79 to 68, 66, just in that tiny area. And that's probably because of the wind affecting the streets, and then the fact that we have so much sun on this outdoor space combined with very little wind. So 79 degrees Fahrenheit that's pretty warm in June if we're thinking of having a restaurant. Maybe it's comfortable for some. Me coming from the Nordics, I think I would be too warm. So I might then consider, you know, maybe it's better to have the outdoor cafe somewhere where there's slightly more of a breeze. But the point of this is just to showcase how you can begin to kind of make informed decisions about how you want your design to be and what the qualities should be like. All right, so I'm going to go back into the main design mode. How are we doing for time? Do we have an hour? We have an hour, right, Andres? Yeah, suddenly got unsure if we had 45. Then we'd be a bit late. All right. Then finally, what I want to show you is how you can see these different qualities side by side. This button is maybe a little bit hidden, but on the on the left-hand side at the bottom, you have a compare mode. So I'm going to go into that. And the purpose of this mode is to view different analyses side by side or different proposals side by side to see what your alternatives are and what the different qualities are and see the trade-offs. So on the left-hand side here, you have your proposal menu and the analysis history. So we've triggered a lot of different analyses on this analyze proposal. But let's choose sun hours. This again. actually sun hours and wind, and also microclimate. And then here I can see that I've got March 20th selected. I actually want to look at June since the microclimate analysis has been triggered for June. But here you go. You have a side-by-side view of the three qualities that we considered. Here you can also change between comfort and direction, and also the month and so on. There we go. But the point here is that now we can really start to inspect this area side by side. So we've got a nice sunny space, 5.5 hours of sun during the day in June. It's quiet, suitable for seated activities. It's got a perceived temperature of 80 degrees Fahrenheit, maybe a bit too hot. If so, again, we could start to look at other spaces. If you wanted to use this for a report, you could take a screenshot, for example, with these panels open so that you also get the stats, or you can also use the camera icon at the bottom here to do a screen capture and get the PNG file. Another thing worth mentioning for the project as a whole, you can also save different camera positions. If you know that you want a very particular angle or a particular view, you can save that camera position and then go ahead and twirl around and look at other things, and then always return to it so that you get the side-by-side view in your reports and so on. All right. Then we will go back into design mode. And maybe one thing worth mentioning, which we haven't talked that much about today, is where you can find different extensions to Forma. So as I mentioned, we want to make Forma as open and extendable as possible, meaning that third parties have already started helping us create different tools and functions. The extensions menu is also located on the left-hand side. And if you open that one, you can add extension and you can browse all the extensions that are currently available. So for those of you working with the Revit, here you can download the Revit add-in. For those working with Rhino, you can download the Rhino plugin. Recently, we also have a Dynamo integration and lots of other exciting things here, parking demand calculator, and so on and so on. So do check that out if you are interested, especially in the kind of cross-product workflows. These are still under development, but we are kind of working hard to improve these workflows. All right, then we have a couple of minutes left. Andres, maybe we can go to the slide showing the kind of upcoming webinars, and then we can do some questions.
So we're actually, I guess, coming to an end. If there are no further questions, we could just showcase the PowerPoint again. There is, so last year we started the webinar series to enable everyone to get started with Forma, and then now we're also sort of doing an iteration on the webinars to essentially do the onboarding, but also like a deeper dive. So from this month, in 2 weeks' time, we'll be doing a deep dive on housing tool. So a house tool is something that was launched just before the holidays and enables you to draw fairly simple surfaces and or areas and populate them with houses. We'll also be doing this sort of onboarding webinar in 3 different cases. So what we did today was a sort of development project. We'll also be looking into a more master plan project, and then we'll also finally sort of bring in a low density project. So maybe leveraging this housing tool as mentioned. These 3 cases will have a lot of similarities, so it won't be teaching you specifics, but it will just give you a different context in what formulas can be used to do. And then the go further with Forma is aimed to be more specific on tools and features, and the 24th of January is our first sort of test run with that. So hope to see some of you there. We'd also very much welcome any input on future webinars. So do stay in touch. And yeah, all of the links to signing up are available in our learning page. So I'll share that as well again.